The winter storm train about to leave the station, where it's going, and who gets the most snow in today's video. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Sunday, November 23rd, and starting to really get closer to the real start of winter. And with that, I'm seeing a pretty sharp gradient or boundary setting up over the next 10 days or so that I think is going to deliver a lot of winter weather for some folks. And for others, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer, but I do think eventually throughout December, a lot more people start to get in on the fun here in the world of snow and winter weather, but unfortunately also probably even means some ice and less fun types of winter precipitation mixed in as well. Now, if you're new to the channel, though, welcome. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorologist at WCCB Charlotte. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for the latest notifications. Doing all those things are free. It doesn't cost you a penny. It doesn't sign you up for some sort of service that you need to worry about. All it does is help you out and help me keep running the channel. So all of you folks out there that are subscribed and you like the videos and you keep coming back, really do mean the world to me, and I'm ever grateful for you, especially on this Thanksgiving week, right? As at least we're thinking about starting it. All right, let's go ahead and get right into the fun stuff. Let's start talking weather, and we're going to start with just a quick overview, and then we're going to get into kind of leading up to Thanksgiving, and then we're going to get to this big gradient setting up, and then I'll talk about where we kind of go from there. All right, so this is the European ensemble members. So basically one of our more reliable data sources showing snowfall over the next 10 to 15 days. And you can just see these tracks of snow starting to fill in on the map, as I think we're going to get a very active storm track during that time period that likely brings some really big snowfall totals for some folks. Exactly where? Well, we'll discuss that here as we keep on going throughout the video. But before we get too caught up in big snow on the way, 10 or so days from now, I do want to talk about what's going on out there right now and how that's going to impact our Thanksgiving forecast. Remember, only about 4 or 5 days away now from Thanksgiving, so getting a lot more higher confidence on that forecast. The big storyline right now, I'd say, is this big low pressure parked right over the Four Corners right now. That's going to produce a storm system that kind of crosses the country now through about Wednesday or Thursday of this coming week. It could produce some rainfall, maybe a little bit of severe weather, and some snow for others, as a little northern stream piece of energy kind of parked up into Washington right now kind of tries to catch up with it and bring some snow to some folks. So that's kind of the general synoptic pattern we're dealing with. If we take a look at what radar looks like right now, it's not the only game in town. You'll also notice, if I go back really quickly, we've got this other dig in the jet stream, and we are getting a bit of a clipper system to bring some snow today up into portions of the Northeast. Let's show it to you. We'll start there. Yeah, pretty good shield of snow if you're watching in Ottawa, especially if you're kind of, we'll say, west of Montreal as well, down through the St. Lawrence River Valley, Watertown, New York, Cornwall. A lot of folks getting this big shield of precipitation. So a bit of a snowy one today into upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire. Folks into the interior of New England have gotten, I wouldn't say lucky per se, but it hasn't been warm by any means. I don't think we're dealing with any White Christmas, I think is the movie, right? Where it's the resort up in Vermont, I want to say. And there's they're wondering where winter is. I don't think it's quite that bad. But we are nonetheless getting some winter weather out there today. If you're in the Southeast, it's just warm, and it has been warm. Now we're cooling down a little bit today compared to yesterday for most of us. Broke all sorts of temperature records in Charlotte, hit 80 degrees. They might have revised it back to 81 and broke, like I said, many daily records. Old record was 76. So those of you that are wondering what kind of warm air I'm talking about that are in other parts of the country, it's there for some of us, just not for all of us. And then you can see that next system getting going down into the Four Corners, with the southern stream energy and our northern stream energy up into the Pacific Northwest currently. All right, let's time out where this goes. Let's talk about now through, like I said, about Thanksgiving, and then we'll really break down the pattern change after the holiday and how that could set up this winter storm train. All right, let's give you that latest mesoscale model data, and quite literally is brand new. It's running as we speak, so we'll go ahead and kind of talk ourselves through it. All right, so as we go later today, the real story in the eastern U.S. is that clipper system. You can see bringing a pretty good band of snow, or at least some snow showers or even squalls, it'll feel like for some of us, into portions of New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire. I think even the Hudson Valley there could get some snow out of this. Would not be surprised. Don't rule it out if maybe overnight tonight, or this evening, I should say, more so than overnight, some of that snow could even try to work into Massachusetts. Maybe places like Boston could get some wet snowflakes. Would not shock me at all. You can see the model picking up on a little bit of that snow trying to work on in. Would not be overly impactful, but could definitely be enough to coat the grass for folks as far south and east maybe as Boston. But for folks further into the interior, could be a good little winter event, especially the higher terrains. We could see 3 to 5 plus inches. But those lower elevations going to be less so, more again of a novelty event than what I would call impactful. As that's working out and into the overnight, you can see that next storm system beginning to propagate eastward. We've got rain into Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, and continues that track east. And by the time we get to Monday afternoon, a pretty rainy day, it looks like, into southeastern Oklahoma, the portions of the Dallas-Fort Worth area up to Texarkana, much of the state of Arkansas, including Little Rock, having a pretty rainy day. Watch for some severe weather on the southern flank of this, where we have the warm sector kind of fueling some of that convection a little bit more. Again, could see a little bit. We've already seen some in that part of the country recently. Then keeps working east, and as far out as the model goes, this is by Monday evening. You can see a lot of that rain and such kind of just slowly working eastbound. So not overly impactful, but definitely going to bring some rainfall at the very least. Zoom things out and show you this system from a broader view. Here it is developing, and notice by the time we get to Monday, tomorrow, we've got the northern stream energy and the southern stream energy. Now, the southern stream energy is working a lot quicker, so it's outrunning that northern polar jet, and that's going to prevent any big-time snowstorms out of this one. But nonetheless, the systems will still exist. They'll just be separated instead of kind of phasing together to get a bigger storm. And, some snow out of it. You can see here by overnight Monday into Tuesday, I think North Dakota going to get some snow. Potentially northern Minnesota could get some snow out of this. Much of Montana. And we've got rain off into the eastern U.S. Again, not much winter weather outside of the far northern fringes of the United States by Tuesday. And you keep it going here, and you're getting into overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. It looks pretty wet into the northeast, the mid-Atlantic, portions of the southeast, snowing pretty good up into Minnesota. I think Minneapolis could even see some flakes out of this by overnight Tuesday. You keep it pushing east, and by the time we get into right here, this is Thanksgiving morning. Good news is most of the storm is out of here, but the lake effect machine really begins to crank up, and I think this is the start of a more active pattern for most folks. You could see, obviously, here's a big low pressure system, and here is all of the kind of wintry weather behind it starting to work in off the Great Lakes. Also, if you'll notice, this 540 line, or that first blue line, digging south, so it's looking like a much colder Thanksgiving than maybe we thought a week or so ago over much of the eastern United States and central United States. And that cold air going to hold on for some time as well. You can see that block of cold air and blue marching into place. And then you see the map really starts to fill in and get active as we get just past Thanksgiving. So let's talk about it. Let's break that pattern down, show you how it's going to evolve and who has the highest chance at snow. All right, here's the pattern change on the way. Now, the next couple of days, still going to be relatively warm for most of us. You can see those orange colors, or that ridging in the eastern United States holding strong. Then comes our Thanksgiving system, and there's that big block of blue working in. So a good shot of cold air for everyone really in the east, I'd say, maybe outside of Florida. But either way, it looks colder than it is right now, I'd say, across the board. That also produces lake effect snow, but it's pretty transient, meaning it's in here, in here and then out of here. And then comes the real pattern change. And this is by the end of this coming weekend, so about 7 or so days from now into the start of December. It looks like a big trough or another big area of blue is going to dump out west. That's going to spike a ridge here into the east. And that's going to set up a very active storm track where you got kind of these clashing air masses and a lot of lift over it. And we are likely to get multiple low pressures to kind of form and do something, generally speaking, along this track right here, where it starts probably in the desert southwest, then climbs up through the Central Plains, the Ohio Valley, and then up through the Northeast, where one side will be very wintry cold weather with some winter weather, including snow and ice potential. And then the other side could still remain wet, but it's going to be warmer, and maybe even some storms could be on the horizon. With a look like this into the mid and upper levels. And you keep it going, folks. And I know everyone in the east is wondering where their big winter storm is. I'll caution you, it's very early. I still see a snowy December. We got to beat down that ridge, though. And you see on the model, it starts to finally do that a little bit more once we get about past the first week of December. And that makes sense. Whenever we look at the teleconnections and some of the other pieces, that lines up pretty well, which I'll show you at the end of the video. And then by this point, by the time we are about a week into December, instead of these storms kind of cutting all the way up, up, I think we'll be able to get a track something maybe a little bit more like this, where we cross more west to east instead of southwest to northeast, as we're probably going to see a lot of over the next 10 or so days. All right, that's what it looks like in the mid-levels. And I think, like I said, this is going to set up a boundary of energy that looks pretty likely to form. So here comes the Thanksgiving system. You can see we've got some vorticity working in. Then after that, it's going to be just rounds of multiple pieces of energy that kind of ride this boundary. And sorry, I was on the wrong model time there. You keep it going. There's the big trough. It dips down. And then see how we just kind of get these pieces that scoop up. So it starts down here into New Mexico, then eventually rides up into the Midwest. That's one piece of energy. And then you keep on going. And it's just kind of a lot more of that same general track is what it looks like right now in the model data. So with a setup like that, what in the world would that possibly look like in terms of radar and impacts? Well, let's go ahead and show you that, and then we'll break down the snow and ice chances associated with this, and then end things out by taking a look at the much longer range deeper into December. All right, we'll start with the European model, then I'll show you the GFS. I'll show you both of them to give you a general idea of what this could look like. Skip ahead into time. Here's that lake effect snow coming in right after, or really during Thanksgiving even, I should say. That kind of lasts through Black Friday. Then, as the kind of pattern is changing, it looks like a bit of a clipper system. This would be by Black Friday into the day after. That's Saturday. You could see maybe some snow up into the Midwest and the Northern Plains. Would not shock me. And we'll watch how that evolves. It's trying to get east while the cold air is still here, but what begins to happen is that next pattern starts to evolve. That big trough's dumping out west. That's spiking the ridge in the east. So I think that clipper system, while it could produce snow in this, into the Northern Plains and Midwest, we'll see what happens. Maybe it could try to sneak into the Northeast, but right now, not that all of the data is really saying that, although the data always changes, so it's good to be proactive and kind of guess what might end up changing. So we'll see. Maybe that marches further east. Either way, though, that boundary sets up, and check it out. You've got this very stout boundary setting up. You've got a lot of rain down south into southern Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, but you look to the north from Denver to places as far south as maybe Kansas City into Iowa. You get rounds of snow and ice to start the month of December, and even to end out to November here. This would be the 30th of November, and that same pattern just keeps on coming. Check it out by the 1st of December. Now, this is far out there, don't get me wrong, so don't look at this and take the specifics away from it, your exact location, but just look at the overall theme, and that is that continual riding of energy. You see these little low pressures. Here's one of them. Here's another one. There's probably another one right into here that's riding that boundary, bringing the warm, humid, muggier, stormier weather down in the southeast and bringing the colder Arctic, snowier and icy weather kind of up into the plains. And you can see those rounds of snow and ice just continuing to propagate through the region. And you'll notice what kind of begins to happen is it starts pretty far north, that rain snow line, and starts kind of very, we'll call it diagonal. And then as you go further ahead into time, it starts to flatten a little bit more. And notice the storms, and again, this is very far out of time, so don't look at the specifics, but the storms, instead of cutting right all the way up through Canada, once you get a couple days into December, maybe a week, start to cut, but then flatten out a little bit more towards the Northeast, and that would up winter weather chances for our friends in the Midwest. The Northeast still would remain pretty warm and stormy into the Southeast, but again, it's early December, so down here we don't expect to get the snow quite yet, as you definitely should not, as history would say. Let me show you the GFS as well, and I guess I didn't pull it up ahead of time, so I'll give you a quick rundown of that one. What does it look like? Well, pretty similar. Here's that system starting to develop. Now, the GFS turns that clipper into something much more amplified, and you can see it gets a lot more snow into places like Chicago, Wisconsin, Michigan, heck, as far south as even central Indiana here by about 6 or so days from now, and then starts to fizzle out as it gets into the Northeast. But you can see it's the same general thing, folks. It's that boundary that keeps on bringing rounds of winter weather, setting up a bit different than the European, but I'll be honest, GFS has been kind of bad this year. If you want to know how bad the GFS has been, what do you see right here? Well, the GFS is a hurricane hitting Florida December 5th, and we all know that doesn't quite check out climatologically speaking. So, I'll show you the GFS there to just show it has the same general idea, but I think the European's probably doing a little bit better on the specifics here in the model. All right, that's the deterministic models, the dynamic physics-based models. Let's take a look at the ensembles now and show you how it kind of matches up quite well, and then briefly discuss later on into December and how this could evolve. Here's the chance of snow, or at least accumulating snow, we'll call it, within about a 24-hour time period. This is some ensemble data. Again, I think really one of the best tools to use when we're looking at the long range, sometimes even the short range as well. All right, here we go. What does it show? Well, here comes that first little early week system. Like I said, could bring some snow up into North Dakota, Minnesota. Checks out. Then the lake effect machine cranks up just in time for Thanksgiving. We are going to get a white Thanksgiving for some folks up into Michigan, Cleveland, Erie, Buffalo, Watertown, the typical suspect areas look to be most likely to get in on that snowy Thanksgiving. Then comes that Clipper system and the pattern change. Pretty good snowfall chances. Like I said, about a week from now, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, back down into the Dakotas, Nebraska, the Rockies look to get quite snowy as well in that time period. And then we just kind of start to keep the boundary the same. But notice what changes. We start to get, again, this kind of snowy track kind of diagonal here, where to the north of that black line, you got snow chances. To the south, not so much. When I say snow chances, it could be snow or ice, and you'll see that here in a moment. But then it starts to kind of flatten out a little bit more as we get about a week or so into December. You can see how it goes diagonal, but then flattens out towards the northeast. So as we go deeper into December, I think that snow line going to slowly move east and south and going to start to, slowly but surely get more folks in on the wintry weather action as the month goes on. The GFS ensemble, same tool here, but the GFS version, kind of going through the boring stuff, agrees. We kind of have that diagonal start, and then it tries to flatten out a little bit more as we go deeper into the month, is how it looks right now. I'll show you this. Another thing, do not just look at snow potential with this setup. This setup kind of screams Arctic air, which is very shallow, which means shallow cold air, which means maybe some ice. So what is the chance of ice? Well, pretty low now through about the next week or so, but then look at the signal grow. This is by right around the last day of November into the start of December. You can definitely see icy signals starting to rear their ugly head. So something to definitely keep an eye on with this pattern as well. All right, so yeah, looking pretty active. We're starting to finally get some real winter weather to talk about. But if you're in places like, let's say, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and you're kind of mad at the video so far, maybe even the Carolinas, you're saying, Gerald, what about me? When can I see some winter weather? Well, without getting into the specifics, let's give you a broad look at some of the signals out there that indicate maybe closer to Christmas and New Year's could be your time to start rocking and rolling. Well, one of my favorite tools to use, there's really two of them in terms of teleconnections. It's the MJO and the NAO. The MJO stands for the Madden-Julian Oscillation. Basically, it's just a wave of rising air that crosses the equator, wraps all the way around the world, and just makes its slow journey around Earth. And meteorologists have been smart enough and researchers have been smart enough to put the pieces together and realize sometimes, depending where it's at, can affect our weather here in the United States, really all months of the year from tropical season to winter. But in terms of the winter impacts, which is obviously what matters now, phase 7, phase 8, and phase 1 are the ones that generally bring colder temperatures. Now, phase 7, notice you still kind of have some southeast ridge trouble, but you start getting cold up into the plains. And guess what? That's about what we're about to enter here to start December. And that matches exactly with what I just showed you in the models. Love when that happens, right? Phase 8, though, that's generally the coldest of all of them. And that one, it gets cold from Florida to Texas to Maine to the Dakotas, and then warmer out west. And then phase 1, sometimes this southeast ridge starts to rear its ugly head again a little bit, but still colder up into the plains, the Northeast, and the Ohio Valley. So what phase are we in right now? Well, if we look at the data, again, today is the 23rd of what month is it? November, right? We're in phase 6. Now, we've kind of done a bit of a loop in phase 6. We were in it. We started to get close to 7. Now, the MJO kind of slowed down a little bit. But all signs are right at the start of the month, we're going to, and really to the end of the month, even the last couple of days, we're going to start to get into phase 7. Remember, phase 7, that's a lot of cold into the plains. And that's exactly what the models show happening. So this is a great tool to use. When does it show phase 8? That's the cold one. Well, the models right now suggest right around the middle of the month onward into the Christmas time period, we could be into phase 8. Now, there's different types of phase 8. I will warn you, if we get the squiggly line here that you see to kind of do something a little bit closer to this, that would be less exciting. That would be a weaker phase 8, so it would be less amplified. But notice a lot of the ensemble members here loop this into a very strong phase 8. That would really ramp up winter storm chances into the eastern U.S. going into the end of December. So again, I know folks in the southeast dealing with the ridge. I would enjoy the nice weather while we have it, because I really do think by the second half of December through about January at least, we're going to start to get much higher chances of cold air outbreaks, and that's obviously going to increase our chance of winter weather. So just don't quite lose faith yet is what I would say to my friends out that way. All right, one more teleconnection to look at is the NAO. What does that mean? What in the world am I talking about? And what is going to happen with it? Well, let's take a look. All right, the NAO, or the North Atlantic Oscillation, has two modes. The MJO had 8 phases. This one has 2. We have a positive and a negative phase. And if you want big winter weather in the east, you want it really negative. This is what sets up when we get a negative NAO. You get a big spiking ridge up into Greenland. You get a big spiking ridge up into Alaska and into the western United States. And what that creates is a buckle. What goes up must come down. So whenever something goes up big in Alaska and big in Greenland, it must go down in between. And that thing is the jet stream, which just funnels in this big path of Arctic cold and kind of does the same thing into Europe, generally speaking, as well, is what you often see. That, this time of year, sets up a favorable storm track that would lead to snow chances further south and, just for a lot more folks into the eastern U.S., generally speaking. Now, it doesn't always set up perfectly like this, but that's just the general gist of what a negative NAO does. What's going to happen? Well, now through about the end of the month, it gets pretty positive, the NAO. That's why this big dump of cold air we're about to see is going to be out west instead of in the east. Now, we're going to get that Thanksgiving cool down, but that longer range pattern I showed you right at the end of the month, going to get dumping that cold air likely more into the plains than into the southeast and the eastern U.S. because of this big positive NAO as it looks. As we get deeper into December, though, about a week or so in, you notice a lot of the members start to chuck this thing down, and we've got a lot more ensemble members there in red that indicate maybe the NAO starts to turn negative again, which obviously would be good news for snow lovers here into the eastern U.S. Now, it's still early December, though, so that doesn't mean Charlotte, Atlanta, Birmingham are going to necessarily see snow, but that's good news for folks in the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, where climatologically it's a little bit easier to get snow this time of year. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now, folks. So just to summarize and give you a kind of final thoughts here, we're going to get a cold Thanksgiving for most of us. No matter what, we're going to get some good lake effect snow. So a white Thanksgiving for folks up that way into portions of those lake effect regions. Then we start to warm back up in the southeast, but it gets mighty cold and mighty wintry into the plains. And that same pattern slowly evolves into the Midwest and the Northeast as we go through about the first week of December. And then later on in the month, I think right now, as I see it, now things change and that's far away, but I've been pretty consistent with this thinking. The further in December we get, the better off it is for everyone in the eastern U.S., at least in terms of the chance of winter weather. Now, just because you have the chance of it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but the more you add chances, the more likely statistically that you're bound to hit at least one of them. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. All right, well, that's all I got for you folks on this wonderful, it is Sunday, right? I will say I'll be at the Monroe Christmas Parade today. So if you're out and about in the Monroe, North Carolina area, you'll see me on the WCCB Charlotte float. Say hi, throw something at me if you want. Please don't, preferably. But either way, yeah, I'll see y'all there. Catch me on WCCB News tonight at 6 and 10, as well as ABC Columbia at 11. And yeah, so busy week ahead. All right, y'all have a great one. Stay safe, and I'll see you all then.